Good evening, everyone. We are delighted to have you with us on this very special assembly. My name is Elizabeth Bina Beliapa Nitarakan, batch of 1970, Devda House. I am the Vice President of the OLA. I'm extremely privileged to be your host for the evening too. As always, we have live chats on both Facebook and YouTube simultaneously. For the first timers on our OL assembly, this is an OL initiative for the OLs. It is brought to you on every second Saturday of the month. Our first assembly was in the month of May when we missed our founders celebration on the campus. Founders is what we look forward to, a time for major reunions and fellowship. However, with these online assemblies, we are now able to reach out across batches and yes, globally too. We try to bring on new dimensions to not just our assemblies, but are making our presence felt on social media too. We have had more than our fair share of technical glitches at every assembly and do our best to learn from it. Yes, with a never given spirit. We at the OLA are extremely encouraged by the growth in viewership, your feedback, and try to incorporate your suggestions to better our programs. I have an extremely important announcement to make. Last week, the OLA sent out the notice and agenda for the first virtual AGM by email to be held on the 26th September at 2:30 p.m. As you all know, the AGM is customarily held during founders at school. In the present situation, we have now decided to do a virtual AGM. We request you all to please participate in this AGM by logging in from your registered email IDs with the OLA, as that will mark your attendance. You can get in touch with us at olalovedale@gmail.com. I repeat, olalovedale@gmail.com to register your email IDs. We now request our HM to address the assembly with an update on the happenings on the campus. Welcome, Mr. Prabhakaran.
Good evening, ma'am. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me to address the gathering. Of course, the COVID scenario is still going on, and we just got an information on 8th from the government of India saying that the partial reopening, SOP for partial reopening from 26th onwards, class 9th and 9 to 12 students can come and meet the teachers and they can come for clearing doubts and that. However, education being a state subject, quite a few states have not opened it up. And I'm hoping that Tamil Nadu state, the situation, the number is more in Tamil Nadu. As and when the clarity comes from the Tamil Nadu state government, maybe November or December, school will be reopening. But we are getting ready. By October end, we'll be ready for reopening and waiting for students to come. Again, lot more things has to be decided by government level. That's what. And apart from this particular this thing, we are very clear on our academic work. Online classes are going on. Online assessment is also done. Now the first week of November is scheduled for the entrance examination, assessment for entrance examination for the next academic year, 2021. So this year, we are going ahead with online assessment for the new admission. That is also been arranged. So whatever we can do with virtual platform, we are managing it. But the social distancing and this issue of physical distancing is an issue at the moment. Let's wait for the best, and I'm hopeful that by November, December, I'll be able to see the children. Campus is looking deserted. That's all from my side. Many more information I will be able to tell you by next session. Thank you.
Do we still have people? I mean, the secondary COVID people secondary
Yeah,
campus?
yeah. We have about 45, 50 people. They are under observation. They are there, and this is only just two rooms in junior school downstairs, first floor. Sorry, ground floor. The first floor is completely sealed. Teachers are moved out. Even dining hall is not working. They get food from outside. We just given them a space, two rooms for these people and one for the medical team. Once the state reopens for the school, all this will go. It's just a matter of sanitization for 3 days, then another 5 days they'll take it. There's a clear-cut government protocol on that. That will be followed. I'm hoping that this will move out by this month.
Thank you so much, Mr. Prabhakaran, for the update on school news. Nothing like having it straight from you, so there are no speculations and rumors on what's happening on the campus. In our last three assemblies, along with the fun and frolic, we have also paid tributes to few of our former teachers. We Laurentians have a great regard for our teachers because of the time spent with them. Almost 70% of a calendar year was on the campus under the watchful care and guidance of our teachers. There is no doubt that we are who we are because of how they molded us too. We at the OLA decided that this will be a special assembly, as announced, to pay tribute to the legendary former headmaster, Mr. K.I. Thomas, an institution by himself. He was the person who established the name and fame of Lawrence School, Lovedale, after independence. He was the last principal and the first headmaster of the school with the transition, which brought us to the month of September, a great significance to the older generation of Laurentians. Founders' Day was always celebrated on the 6th of September up to 1956. Among the many changes which was brought in by Mr. Thomas, Founders was brought forward to May for the benefit of both parents and students. Many of us who are at school from the early 50s to mid 70s have been fortunate to have had Kit, as he was fondly called, as the head of the institution, leading and guiding both staff and students alike. I now like to welcome Mr. Ramesh Venkateshwaran, batch of 1967, Sumero House, who was also a former headmaster of our school between 2005 to 2006, to do the tribute to Mr. K.I. Thomas. Before calling upon Ramesh on behalf of the entire OL community, let me first congratulate Ramesh for his very recent appointment as chairman of the Board of Governors of IIT Palghat. You truly do the alumni proud, Ramesh. Thank
Thank you,
you.
Beena.
Over to you.
Thank you, Beena. Thank you so much for the introduction. Uh, Fellow OLs, I first of all need to thank the OLA, the Old Laurentians Association, for giving me one more privilege. A few weeks ago, you gave me the privilege of anchoring a tribute to Mr. Selvapakyam. And today you've given me this beautiful opportunity and the privilege of taking the Old Laurentians for a walk down memory lane of the 1950s and to the 1970s. Any Old Laurentian who is watching this film live in the 65 to 85-year-old bracket, if we are anywhere between 65 and 85, I think a lot of what we are today, who we are today, where we are today, we owe it to one person who gave us this education, who gave us this opportunity. All of us know whom we are talking about, K.I. Thomas, fondly called Kit. I want to give a disclaimer to all of you here before all the Old Laurentians in that period. Any student between 1950 and 1970 would have huge number of stories. Every single one of us has a personal anecdote, stories about the great Kit. And it has been an extremely difficult task to choose just 8 to 10 people from a 20 to 25, 30-year time frame, 50, 60, and 70. So it's extremely difficult, and we believe that we have some interesting people who have something to share. I've also sent out mails to some of you to share with me stories, and I thought I would bring it on. Many of you have sent some lovely snippets. Thanks very much. I just realized, and OLA, here is a thought for Johnny Paul and Beena and gang. Maybe we need a full-length film on K.I. Thomas, because I don't think we could do anything less than that for somebody like Mr. Thomas. Well, OS, for the next 60 minutes or so, we've put together a program paying tribute to really the founding father of the Lawrence School, Lovedale, as we know it today. And what we've got in the next 60 minutes is we put together a mix of OLs, we put down former teachers, and the group of people, we've kept it a little bit of a suspense, but I can tell you a few things. We've got a few people across the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Just for a statistic for all you numerically inclined people, we have 4 former teachers, we have 1 head boy, 1 head girl, 1 vice head girl, 4 old Laurentians who had siblings in school with them, 5 old Laurentians who are also parents, that is 2G old Laurentians, 1 old Laurentian who's a 3G old Laurentian grandparents. We have 3 old Laurentian Association OLA presidents, and in the next 50 to 60 minutes, we have a combination of live discussions, chats with the old Laurentians, and recordings. So that's our plan for the next few minutes that we're going to be together. And let me invite the man who had a grandstand view of Mr. and Mrs. K.I. Thomas, Salim Thomas. Salim is the person who can give it to us straight from the horse's mouth. And Salim, good evening to you. Good evening to you. Welcome to this program. For the benefit of the group, what we've done is Salim can get very technical and very involved. So we thought we would give Salim in doses, and we have broken up Salim's chat with us in 3 parts. What we'll do is we'll take Mr. Thomas before he joined Lovedale. We'll take the Lovedale years, and we will take Mr. Thomas post Lovedale. If you can recognize this young man in the band, you get 100 points. 1963, Aravali House, a doctor from the AFMC batch of 1970, Master of Surgery in 1976, rank holder number 1 the Pune University board for the AFMC and the Master of Surgery. Indian Navy from 1971 to 1986, part of the first Indian expedition of the Indian Navy to Antarctica. Inductee into the AFMC Hall of Fame 2018, the first year that this Hall of Fame came in. Golf, squash, bridge, philately are his passions. And with Omana, his wife, Salim and Omana are now actively involved in this great institution which every person or every Laurentian knows about, Shishya. So Salim, let's look at what you can share with us as a son, as Mr. Thomas, who he joined Lovedale and before we came to it. Over to you, Salim.
Thank you, Ramesh. At the outset, I would like to thank the organizers, Rohan, Karthik, Kuntal, Beena, who have put together this wonderful tribute to Kit. It has been my privilege over the last so many years to be the recipient of, so many old Laurentians from 1951 to almost 75. Though Kit was at Lovedale from 1950 to 1970, that's a stretch of 20 years. He and I think the Reverend Padfield had the longest innings as heads at Lovedale. The others have all done their 5-year contracts and moved on. The number of old Laurentians who have come up to me or have messaged me or spoken to me, telling me about how much they owe to Mr. Thomas for the way he taught them, for what he made of them, and what they have become in later life is simply awesome. I'd like to read a couple of 1956 batch. When this notice went out, 56 batch, Sidney Reynolds, who's now in Canada, sent me a message. My respect and admiration that I have had for him has influenced my life, especially since I was a teacher for 35 years. He had the school, education, and students' welfare in his heart. when I misbehaved, Spud and Orchard raiding, he reminded me about the fish train and then gave me something productive to do as part of the variety show. Punishments were not just caning, though I'm told, as you will also hear subsequently, many of our speakers were caned in that day. Kit was born in 1914 in a small town called Konnakolam near Trichur. He had his early school education there, and then he moved on to the Madras Christian College at Tambram, where first as a student and then as a reader in the Department of English, he came under the influence of two amazing Englishmen, Dr. Boyd and then the then principal, Dr. McPhail. Both of them influenced him tremendously. And in fact, in his office at Sishya, he had Dr. Boyd's photograph, which is still there even today. After leaving Tambram, he went to the UK to do his TD from London University and then a master's from Edinburgh University. He subsequently taught at the Rajkumar College, Rajkot, where soon after which he got married to Rangam Verghese, and both of them moved on to when he became the principal of the Sindh Madrasa in Karachi. This was in early 47. He was there through the period of independence, and he moved back to India in 51, late 51. There is a story which may be apocryphal. He had applied for the job as head of Lovedale, and after the interview, he was marked number 3. The first person refused the job. The second could not be contacted, and the then Secretary Education said, "Give it to the third man, whoever he is," and the rest is history. Well, that's a bit before Lovedale. Ramesh, would you like to move on?
Yeah. So Salim, tell us one thing. We heard some. I didn't know Salim in school. I joined in '64, and Salim left in 1963. But I was very fortunate to have interacted a lot with Salim because I was in Pune and Bombay in those days. I think when Salim was the AFMC, his director, Admiral Kupuswamy, in those days, we were all very close family friends. And I think squash court. We've also met a lot in Bombay when he was in Bombay with other old Laurentians like Freddie Diwan, Darius Mystery, and so on. But tell me one thing, Salim. How did you get the name Salim? There was a story on that which I've heard. Thomas and Salim, yeah.
Yeah, there are a number of stories. It depends who asks me. I tell them. But the commonest one is that I tell them, well, to clarify matters, the name Salim comes in the Bible also. Okay, so we are Syrian Christians, we all have biblical names. Okay. But Salim is very much more identified as a Muslim name. And my father had a very good friend during his days in Karachi. I was born in 47 when they were in Karachi. And I was given this name because of his very good friend. I'm told his mother, my grandmother, was not very pleased.
Okay. Yeah. So the question comes because you came in from Karachi. If you had come in from Cochin, I guess nobody would have asked you why are you Salim.
Now it's quite common. I find a lot of people with mixed names. Okay.
Thanks, Salim. We'll come on again to let's hear some of the Lovedale stories your life in Lovedale with K.R. Thomas before I take on a few others. Right. The next person we have, in 1948, Miss Cunningham came in from Madikere and joined Lawrence School Lovedale after a short stint in the St. Joseph's Coonoor. She joined Lovedale in 1948 as Miss Cunningham. She retired in 1971. Anyone who has gone through the prep school in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s would have been taught by her, and it's unlikely that she would have forgotten your name or your family or your background even then. Even though she retired in 1971, 72 years after the date she joined Lawrence School, Lovedale in 1948, she is still in Lovedale. She celebrated her 99th birthday on 28th of August this year, and she is none other than Mrs. Enos. Let's hear what Mrs. Enos has to say about K.I. Thomas.
I would like to devote a few lines to Mr. K.I. Thomas, the headmaster of the Military Memorial School, now known as the Lawrence School, as a teacher in close association. Mr. Thomas was a combination of many things: a parent, a companion to Salim, a loving husband to Tangam, his wife, a referee or arbitrator when arguments arose, a teacher, and has given up many possibilities only for the sake of the progress of Lawrence School. Mr. Thomas was personally enthusiastic, packed in extra energy, took difficulties in his stride, never a wet blanket, was always encouraging to reach the top. He was particular about tasks being he was particular about tasks being performed in the right order, wouldn't tolerate procrastination and indecision.
That was Mrs. Enos for you, all of 99 years old, and still living just outside Belligoda Bridge in Lovedale. I actually never studied in prep school, but I had the good fortune of interacting very closely with Mrs. Enos in my short tenure as the headmaster. And I'm sure all the old Laurentians will agree with me that the words that could describe her are probably energy, enthusiasm, love, warmth, caring, cheer, positivity. God knows any of those words are as good as one another. She was a great source of support to me when I was there, and it was lovely. Well, her two favorite statements are supposed to be, and I presume the prep school Laurentians will recognize this. One of her favorite statements was, "You are only half dressed when you don't have a handkerchief." Very proper about dress. And the other, obviously, the well-known one is the child of grace with a wooden face. So Mrs. Enos is there, and I'm sure everybody says hi to her when we land up in the Lawrence School, Lovedale. Our next speaker, the head boy of 1959. Story is that his mother would pass Lovedale in a bus on the way to Ooty, and every time she saw this school, she said that one of her children should study there. They didn't have enough money and couldn't afford it for all, but one of the siblings was lucky enough to get there. He had 4 older sisters and 1 elder brother, but he managed and made it to Lovedale. He probably is the truest old Laurentian that I can see in recent times. 3 children in Lawrence School, 3 grandchildren in Lawrence School, 1 expected to pass out in 2022. Gundam is somebody that anyone who visits Nilgiris anytime in the last 40, 50 years would know, if not personally, would have heard of him. So I have a great pleasure. It's a great honor to bring in Gundam, because whenever I've seen him, whenever I've spoken to him, he's again been one of those extremely bouncy, cheerful Laurentians who never let age come in the way of interacting with people from his school. So that's Mr. Gundam for you, and we have caught him in his home in the Nilgiris. T. Gundam.
Please tell us your memories of K.I. Thomas as headmaster of Lawrence School.
As far as Mr. K. Thomas is concerned, he joined the school in 1950. And I joined the school from 51, right from prep school to senior Cambridge. Our batch was the last batch to do senior Cambridge. And I was the head boy in 59. I must give some instance
Instance?
which happened during my period when I was almost in the 9th and 10th class, and we did something wrong. Wrong in the sense we went and went to the school orchard, and we got caught. Headmaster called us and said, "When you do something wrong, you must take the punishment." We all said, "Yes, sir." Said, "Since you people are very senior, I will not punish you in the lodge hall, but in my room, I will cane you." And he gave us all two canes.
Yeah.
Anyhow, we took it nicely. And, see, you learn through mistakes.
Of course, uncle.
Once we did that, after that, whatever, you'll think twice to do something wrong.
Yes.
And he was a perfect man for discipline. And anyhow, we've gone forget. I must tell you one thing. When some parents came after I finished school, and I used to visit the school almost all founders except one, I think, on all these years. He used to, say, some parents asked, "Why don't you send a lot of people to IAS, IPS? What have Lawrence School produced?" And I must tell with great honor, he said, "I produced Mr. Gundam."
Wow.
Why he said that was, I must very frankly say, I didn't go to any school before Lawrence, or I didn't go to college after Lawrence. My history is only Lawrence School. And today, what I am, I owe it to Lawrence School and Kit Thomas. There's no doubt about that. And, I am not shy of saying that I didn't study in college. Still senior, and I was head boy. I got General Cariappa's shield for the best all-round cadet. And, you'll be surprised if you see on record, I was the football captain, hockey captain, athletics captain. And I was the opening bowler for cricket.
Fantastic, uncle.
I am today also in this age of 80. I'm nearing 18 another 3 months. I am doing the Lawrence School exercise, PT exercise, even today, every morning. I owe all this to Kit Thomas, Lawrence School, Lovedale.
That is a vintage Gundam, full of energy, full of bounce and cheer. 80 years old, he's just the same. I mean, whenever I've seen him, one of the things which fascinates me about the Lawrence School and our network, I'm sure everybody, even the other public schools, say that you guys have a phenomenal network, and I take their word for it. But there is no age gap. There is nothing about when you passed out. When I went as the head of Lovedale in 2005, Gundan was the president of the OT gym, and I applied for the OT gym membership. Immediately, my membership came, and Mr. Gundan actually tells me, Ramesh, you don't have to come for the meeting. I said, "No, Gundan, you're a president of the club, and I don't want anybody to tell you or say that, just because you and I were from the same school and I'm the head." And I said, "No, I will come for the meeting." But what amazed me was that Gundan actually made a statement like this to me and said, "It's okay, you don't have to come." That's the kind of bond I see with all of us, and that is Lawrence School for us, whichever way we look at it. So that's Gundan, 1959 head boy, getting to 80, 3 children, 3 grandchildren, and quite a figure in Lovedale. Another person from that vintage, a little junior to Mr. Gundan, head girl of 1961, had a brother and sister in school and children are Laurentians. Again, an amazingly cheerful person, amazingly friendly person, never seen a frown on her face. Didn't know her in school days, but became, I think, good friends. I'd like to say I'm a good friend of hers after that. And always running around from pillar to post, jumping up here and jumping up there. If you can recognize her, that is Ruku Reddy, Ruku Krishnan. Rukmini is past president of the OLA, and we have her sharing her life or views of Mr. K.I. Thomas. Ruku Reddy. Hi, Ruku. Good to see you again, and thanks for being with us on this program. Tell us a little bit, Ruku, about yourself and how you came into Lovedale before we get on to your memories of Mr. Thomas. I know you have a long association with Lawrence, so over to you.
Hi, Ramesh. Ramesh, actually, Indira, Lakshman and I were studying at the Nazareth convent. And when Lakshman completed class 5, we necessarily had to move out of the convent. And that's when my parents decided to put 3 of us into Lawrence School. That was in 1956, yes. And since then, it's been a very long association, not only with me and my siblings, but also with our children. My 3 boys went there, Ravi, Prithvi and Lakshman, and my sister's daughter Divya studied in Lovedale. So we've been constantly coming up for founders and keeping in touch.
Great. So it's a 64-year-old continuous association with the Lawrence School, Lovedale. And I think you were the 1961 head girl.
I was.
Okay. So head girl, a parent, siblings, and of course the president of the Alumni Association also. We can go on and on, but let's get on to the main theme, Ruku, and your memories of Mr. K.I. Thomas.
Oh, there are several memories, but I would really like to point out one aspect of Mr. Thomas, which not many people probably are aware of, and that is his sense of humor. It started maybe for me to realize it. I had left school, I was a parent, and I walked into an old Laurentian dinner. And from far away, I could hear this voice saying, "Hello, Auntie." And the name stuck, at least it stuck for Salim Thomas, because that's all he ever calls me. And it was great fun knowing him after we left school, because we knew him on another level. We spoke to him on another level. We confided in him in another way. And his treatment of us was no more kids. So that was also nice. But I do remember one very cheeky incident when I was in school. And that is maybe 1959. Ava Paranjyoti's mother, Auntie Com, was staying with Princey and Mrs. Thomas. And so was a young man who was probably related to Salim and his own age. We were told by Ava that all the elders were off for the staff dinner party, and therefore we planned to visit her in the night. We jumped out of the prep room window, probably past 8 o'clock, and ran to Princey's house. 4 or 5 of us, I remember. And Salim, of course, welcomed us in and into the kitchen and gave us all Mrs. Thomas's chocolate fudge and put on some music. And we were all, then suddenly we thought we heard footsteps and we ran out of the house and back to school. All this whole episode may have not taken more than 20 to 30 minutes at the most. I don't even think that much. But it seemed like it was very scary, because when we got into the prep room window, the last girl in, which I think was Manju Asanand, was caught by the Gurkha. He shone the torch, he was blowing the whistle, and in general, we just had it. Finally, I think only a few of the girls were caught because the Gurkha recognized them and they were reprimanded. 3 years later, in 1961, when I went to say goodbye to Mr. Thomas and, the usual thank you, sir, and all that, I was about to leave the office and he called me back and he said, by the way, gate crashing into other people's homes is not a good idea. And I almost sunk to my feet. So that was, a memory I can't forget. I can never forget him. Many, many things about him. And every time I put foot on Lawrence School soil, Mr. Thomas is very, very clear in my memory.
Hey, thanks, Ruku. Yes, I can only remember Mr. Thomas as a man of very few words and his walk down that path as we were sitting on the banks. And I can quite imagine your reaction in the Princey's room when he says something 3 years after the event. Thanks a lot for sharing this. I think you have shared a facet or a aspect of Mr. Thomas that very few of us would probably relate to and know. Thanks a lot, Ruku, and I'm sure we'll see a lot more of you and continue to see you in the Lawrence School, Lovedale. All of us look forward to seeing you. Thanks for joining us and sharing.
Thank you, Ramesh. Thank you so much.
That was Ruku. I think I don't think we recorded it, but I did mention to Ruku that thank God I didn't get her to school and talk to the girls when I was the headmaster, because I don't think her story would have been the best thing to do at that point of time. I don't know if many of you, she spoke about a very interesting thing about the lighter side of Mr. Thomas. And I think all of us always saw Mr. Thomas as a person who was quiet, who never really spoke too much, and so on and so forth. But there was a lighter side of Mr. Thomas. And I'm trying to see if we can show you the lighter side. But in case we are not able, there you are. I mean, can any of us of the 50s or 60s, can you ever imagine Mr. Thomas sitting on a tricycle like that? It is hilarious. I wouldn't have believed that it is him. I would have probably thought it's Salim trying to look old rather than Mr. Thomas trying to look young. But that was Mr. Thomas, and thanks to Ruku for sharing that. Just a little bit about Mr. Thomas, Kate Thomas again, before we go on to the second part. So I want to bring in Salim, and we're really looking at what was Mr. Thomas's days in Lovedale like, in the Lawrence. So we just heard from Salim about the pre-Lawrence days and when he came in from Karachi. And he must have come in at age 34, 35, 36 or whatever. It was in his time that he came in as principal and then became a headmaster. And I never realized this, but he actually became a headmaster from principal in 1953 or 54 or 55. But funnily, even in 1967, he was still called Princey. That's a clip from his qualifications, his resume in the school files. Before anybody, Mr. Prabhakar or anybody says anything, I'm not guilty for this. Somebody has given me this, and I will share the source. But actually, his qualifications, so this piece of paper must be at least 80 years old, 75 years old, from 1950 to 70 years old. So Mr. Thomas was from England, and he came back, and we used to call him Princey. He was the third Indian head of the Lawrence School, Lovedale. We had Mr. Suraj Ban and Mr. Lakhani, who were probably stopgap arrangements for the head of the school, and they were ministry managed people. I just want to say one thing, but everybody has so much to say. But since I was there, what I see is the importance of Mr. Thomas's role for the 20 years that he played. And I don't know about the 20 years, but certainly the first 3 to 5 years, was he had to manage two very, very important transitions. He had to manage an important transition of changing from a British school to an Indian school. It was a completely British-oriented school to an Indian school. And the other transition, which was from a military-oriented school to a civil-oriented school. So I think it would have been a fantastic challenge, and I don't know if Salim has anything to share on that. But I see that this is the period where Mr. Thomas built the school, and I would like to call in Salim to share his life with Mr. Thomas in the Lawrence School days. Over to you, Salim.
Thanks, Ramesh. I must appreciate also Mrs. Enos, Gundam, and Ruku. Mrs. Enos, I remember Mr. Enos. He had a dance band called Mr. Enos's Hot Shots. And they were a regular item in the Nilgiris and Ooty in the 50s. Of course, school dances, we had our own band, and we had a dance band. Of course, there was a school brass band, there was a school orchestra, and there was this dance band which played for the school dances. And the school orchestra used to go out to play at local doos in Ooty. And in 57 or so, Pandit Nehru visited Ooty, and the school tried to get him to come to the school, but he declined the invitation. But at the government house dinner that night, the school orchestra was there to play, and he came over to say hello to the children. And the girl said, "Sir, why don't you come to our school?" And he said, "Of course I'll come." And the next day, he and Kamraj Nader and Indira Gandhi all came to the school. I think, Ramesh, that photograph is somewhere there.
Yes, it is. It is.
Getting to see it.
Yes.
And as Ruku said, he had an impish sense of humor. There was a Mr. Lobo who was the piano teacher. I know those who were in school in the 50s remember Mr. Lobo as a very large gentleman. He was about 6 feet tall and 6 feet broad. And at one of the staff amateur hours, the staff entertaining the kids, he was dressed as one of the school girls, and Kit was dressed as one of the school boys. And they sang, "If you were the only boy and the girl in the world, and I was the only boy." And you can imagine the hilarity in the large hall that evening. In the early days, Kit was a very strict person. In fact, his nickname was Stiffy. Before he became Princey, he was Stiffy. And quite often, I think dealing with the big boys of those days, he had to be quite firm, and quite a few got caned. But as time passed, he mellowed, and the amount of physical punishment became much fewer. Father was also very keen race goer. Everybody knows he enjoyed going to Ooty for the races. He would go down to Bangalore for the races. He loved playing cards. His was not just an academic world which he lived in. He thoroughly enjoyed himself. Though in Lovedale he was not much of a sportsman. If you see Dr. McPhail's letter when he went to England, it says he was an outstanding tennis and basketball player. So there was some sporting activity also. By the time he left in 71, he had to leave because of ill health. He was a heavy smoker also. And the lungs don't deal with smoking so well. And he had a bout of pneumonia in 1970. And on medical advice, he was asked to go down to the plains rather than stay up in the hills. And so in 70, he decided to go down and to retire and settle down in Chennai. And at that time, Mr. KPS Menon of the IAS was the chairman of the board. And he said, if Kit cannot stay in the school in Lovedale and has to go down to the plains, I think we should take the school down to the plains with him. Anything else, Ramesh?
Great. No, okay, I have a question to ask of you. Was Mr. Thomas always a silent type, even at home, when you with the family and all of you?
He was very silent. I must tell you, he was very technophobic also. My mother used to drive the car always because she was a good driver. My father, we had the driver.
The Standard Herald.
The Standard Herald, correct. And our driver was manual, you may remember. And father was being taught how to drive the car. And he would put it into second gear and go all the way from Lovedale to Ooty in second gear. Change. After a week of that, he stopped. Either mother drove or the driver drove. And the other one was he enjoyed his evening drink. And one of my cousins was teaching in Lovedale at that time. And he would drop in every evening to say hi to father. And he would find the Everly Brothers LP was playing. There were no tapes. But this LP would play every evening or whenever he dropped in. Everly Brothers was playing. So one day he said, Apichan, you're very fond of the Everly Brothers. The father said, no, that was the LP left over there when Salim left for college. I just play it every day.
Thanks. Great. I know we can go on and on, but thanks. That's great. Yeah, you've given us something about Mr. Thomas, which many of us will not know. We'll get back to Salim a little bit later for the post Lawrence days, and I didn't realize that ill health actually, sort of accelerated the process of departure from Lawrence. That's news to me today, quite honestly. Thanks, Salim.
Okay.
We have our next one is somebody we tried our level best to get on, but somehow he said I won't come on. But I brought him on because for all of us who studied between the 50s and the 70s, he is an institution himself. He was a student. He was a teacher. He came back as a teacher. His family was full of teaching, and another lively, bouncy person, full of energy. Even when we met him last, the family's name is synonymous with music, whether it was Western music or the band or whatever it is. Even though Mr. Denzel Prince said he did not want to get on in a video or anything like that, I thought no program about Lawrence School, Lovedale, K.I. Thomas is complete without the people who were there in those days. And if they're still around, if they did not participate, then this program would not be complete. So we've got Mrs. Enos, we've had Mrs. Enos, and we'll bring in Denzel Prince. So we've just got a short clip. Interestingly, our class of 67, we went to Lawrence for our 50th reunion in September, and luckily we had a great time. So we were in the large hall, all of us were singing hymns, and Mr. Denzel Prince and a whole lot of teachers were there, and I was the coordinator. So we were singing one of our favorite hymns, Lead Kindly Light, and I saw Mr. Denzel Prince sitting over there. And I said, if anybody's singing in the large hall and Mr. Prince is there, he can't be in the audience, he has to be conducting it. So a short clip of Mr. Denzel Prince in the large hall, Lead Kindly Light.
Keep down my feet, I do not ask to see the distant sea. Once have enough for me. I love it, verse 2. I was forever the stone that God should lead me on.
Denzel Prince of 2017 could as well have been the Denzel Prince of 1965 or 70 or anything. Whether you're singing a sober hymn like Lead Kindly Light or whether you were singing Nilgiri Hills, the same level of passion and energy he could transmit to all of us kids who are trying to bunk everything possible. As I said, if there was somebody who was in Lovedale who was part of Mr. Thomas's team and we could get them, we've tried our best to get them. And therefore, the next person I have, and I have great pleasure in presenting to all of you, came into Lovedale as a teacher in 1959 and stayed till 1973. He was the chemistry teacher. He was my housemaster when I joined in 1964, the Sumeru housemaster. Left in 1973 and joined the Majura Coach School in Madurai, the Vikasa. 1984, he started his own school in Madurai called Jeevana, which has got 2,000 plus children. He was running the school almost 100% actively till about a couple of years ago. Now he's settled in Bangalore. Memory is good. He remembers all the school days, all the guys who were there. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to present Mr. M.S. Iyengar.
principal of the Lawrence School of Dale. He gave an excellent image to the school. Even before children were born, children were registered in the school. I don't know about the present situation. Why this school became so popular? Because it was providing holistic education to children, and children were very happy, and children who left school did very well after leaving school. Mr. Thomas, I think, was influenced by J. Krishnamurti, a great philosopher, educationist of those days, and so he did not believe in too many punishments. He used to have staff meetings every month, and whenever staff complained about X or Y child, he used to tell them to introspect and see about their childhood and help the children to develop. Then, uh, in this connection, I want to narrate an incident about punishment. You may all remember, those of you who were there in the 60s may remember Wally Kapan, an old student, was also a head boy. One day he got a bright idea with his friends. He saw some chicken in Mr. Thomas' house, and one evening he went there with his friends, collected a few chickens, and came to the kitchen, where he had influence with the cooks and also the steward. He got them cooked and ate nicely. He was very happy that nobody had caught him. 2 3 days later, he came to know that the headmaster had come to know about this incident. So he became extremely nervous. Then the headmaster sent for him. He went to headmaster's office, and as he entered, I don't know how many times he said, "Sorry, sir, sorry, sir, sorry, sir." Mr. Thomas did not tell him anything. He just told him, "Go and meet Mrs. Thomas." He went and met Mrs. Thomas. He must have apologized. We don't know what happened after that. This is how Mr. Thomas dealt with problems. Mr. Thomas never got rattled about various things. One incident which should have perhaps rattled him was that Salim Thomas, in a chemistry practical class, I heard after the class that he had taken a little mercury oxide. As a chemistry teacher, I became very nervous and went to the headmaster to report. I don't know whether it was true that he took a mercury oxide or not. Mr. Thomas heard me and said he will deal with the matter. I don't know what happened afterwards, whether the doctor was met, what happened, we don't know. Then the other aspect which influenced me greatly was his trust for teacher. He used to trust his teacher. No teacher in Lovedale wrote notes of lessons, but all teachers, I think, did their job effectively, which indicates that children who went to the exam did extremely well. So there was no need for notes of lessons. Now today, I am running a school with 2,000 children, and the principal is struggling with teachers with notes of lessons and plan of work and all that. Now, I became principal of Vikasa Majura Courts after Mr. Thomas retired. Then I used to meet him off and on. Now, even my teachers who have retired from Vikasa tell me that because I trusted them, they were able to do a good job and they progressed well. So, trust begets trust. This is how I feel. Then Mr. Thomas, when he retired, I used to go and meet him in Chennai. And Mr. M.B.S. Henry, who was the managing director of Majura Courts, who started this Vikasa school, he asked me whether we can invite him to be on the board of governors of Lovedale, of Vikasa. Then I requested Mr. Thomas. He accepted. He used to attend the board meetings every year. And once when he came to Madurai, I requested him to address the students. He addressed the students and he mentioned about two words, inquisitiveness and curiosity. Inquisitiveness is a very good thing. You must learn, you must understand, you must seek. All these inquisitiveness help. Curiosity is not like that. So the students were impressed. This is how he used to address assemblies in Lovedale also. So in effect, Mr. Thomas was a great headmaster and he had influence on all people who came in contact with.
Yeah, that was Mr. Iyengar. As I said, my housemaster for the 4 years that I was in Lawrence School, Lovedale. And we've been in touch here and there. Another teacher who didn't want to come on, I don't know why, because he's full of energy and he kept sending me notes and everything. Anybody who studied in Lawrence between the 1963 and 1973, that's the time he was there, would remember a very young, trim, dapper, athletic-looking person running around the field. And he came in 1963 as a young physical education teacher, and that is Mr. E.R. Reddy. I got in touch with him about a couple of months ago, and when I started preparing this for Mr. Thomas, he had so many things to say, and he would keep sending me messages. But he said, "No, I don't want to come on video for whatever reason." But what amazed me, and when I think back to 50 years ago, how we take our teachers for granted, how we don't even realize what they have done. I mean, I would never have known that Mr. Thomas was in Edinburgh in the 40s and 50s. We just take a teacher as a teacher who's there and, out to make our life a little miserable in most of the time. But E.R. Reddy was a graduate of the Lakshmibai College of Physical Education in Gwalior in 1963. If you see the board over there, he was the best outgoing student of the batch of 1963, the president of the college. He was also a member of the 4x100 meter gold medal winning team of the 4x100 meter relay of the national athletics, part of the All India University team. So he was with us, and I'm saying this only because they were there in the prime of Mr. Thomas's time, and they're still connected. He left and went to Madurai to join Mr. Iyengar in Vikasa, and in 1983, he started his own school, and Mr. Reddy is in Chetna. He has sent me quite a few incidents with Mr. Thomas. They're very long, so I will probably give it to the OLA, and we'll put it up on the website. But I'm going to share only one short incident, which I think many of us know about it, and we thought it was hilarious in those days and even now. And that was when a very senior, very senior visitor, a very important visitor, was visiting the school, and he was introducing the teachers. So Mr. Reddy says, I was also there, and he was introducing all his teachers. And then he points to Miss Balla, and she says, "This is my senior mistress." And apparently there was a huge amount of laughter or awkwardness or whatever it is. So that story of Mr. Thomas is always, good fun to bring a smile back to all of us. Let's get back to an old friend, Laurentian friend, who again I thought we will get him live because he's an amazing, true Laurentian. A very good friend of mine because he's 1 year junior to me. Passed out in 1968 from Nilgiri House. He followed me to IIT Bombay, so we had a 4-year overlap in Bombay. He came to Bangalore, so we had an overlap there. His daughters and my daughter were in the same class, so we had an overlap there. So we have a phenomenal friendship of almost 65 years. A very, very lovely person, a great friend, Viju Parameshwar, and that's young Viju in the Lawrence School in the famous autograph books of those days. Viju is going to be with me live over here, and we will have a chat with Viju. Viju studied 10 years in the Lawrence School, I presume from the first to the last class over there. He had 2 siblings in the Lawrence School. He, according to him, he refused Doon, but I refuse to believe anybody in the first standard refused Doon. And Viju's got this smile on his face, I know. But, I've seen him as an honest guy with me, so I believe him. President of the OLA, one of the early presidents, or maybe the first president of the Friends of Lovedale Society. And his father was the first member of the Board of Governors of the Lawrence School Lovedale when it was formalized into a board, apparently in 1971. All I can say about Viju is, if you don't have the school archives, it's good enough to go to Viju Parameshwar. His network and his memory of people, not just in his time, any time, is amazing. Viju, welcome, and over to you.
Thank you, Ramesh. Let me start by talking about. I heard that Mrs. Thomas had passed away as I was visiting Madras. Obviously, I knew I had to go and visit Mr. Thomas, but I was rather apprehensive because I hadn't met him for over 15 years since he left Lovedale. And I didn't know how I would, talk to him under these circumstances. I thought it would be really sort of a difficult conversation. Anyway, went along in the evening. Mr. Thomas came out and said, "Hello, Viju, come in here and meet some friends." And he introduced me to about 6, 7 people sitting around. They were all old Laurentians, mostly senior to me. Before I knew it, I had a glass of whiskey in my hand, and Mr. Thomas proceeded to speak to all of us, asking each of us about our friends from school, not mixing up anybody's batch and which friends were appropriate to whom, jumping across 5, 10 years difference in ages. Perfect memory, made the whole evening very pleasant for everyone. And, that was one aspect of Mr. Thomas. The other thing let me talk about is him as a teacher. Mr. Thomas took one class on Tuesday for the 10th standard in English.
Yep.
He did that, although English was taught by some other teacher also. He just did one class. That kept him in touch, I think, with everyone. And everyone had 2 notebooks. Every week you had to write an essay in one book. You submitted that in the class. So the following week, you wrote in the other book while he was correcting the first one. And you got it back the next week. And his classes were typically based on a few errors that he found in what was being written. And those were, extreme classes were unforgettable. I remember one class was on shall and will. And no one who's been through that will ever make a mistake again. I shall, you will. I shall. And, and he always had his hands were covered in chalk dust. And he used to keep picking up his specs and putting it down. So his specs were covered in chalk dust. Another class I remember was when he said, we went to Royal Cave and ate masala dosa. And then he'll ask, is that right? Is there any error in that? And so on. And he had this great tendency to, if anybody puts up the hand, he will ask everybody else and come to that person last. So there was a famous story going around in those days about one of his classes from the 50s, when there was a big tough guy who had never answered a question in his life, sitting at the back. And so on this class, Mr. Thomas said, today we're going to talk about conjunctions. There were a lot of mistakes on conjunctions. And he says, who can tell me about conjunctions? So this guy, for the first time in his life, puts up his hand. And Mr. Thomas asks each person, tell me. And each guy says, I don't know. And meanwhile, this guy is getting more and more excited. He's saying, sir. And so finally he comes, he says, okay, tell us about it. And he says, so I can't explain it. I'll give you an example. So Mr. Thomas says, okay, tell us about it. And he says, Coimbatore is a very big conjunction. And so Mr. Thomas, so that's Mr. Thomas for you.
Viju, my worry about you is I can keep listening to you forever. I don't think you will ever run short of stories. So we'll have OLA, Johnny Paul will have a separate session. But since you spoke of English, I'm reminded of 2. I can think back to 2. One, just like shall and will, I remember the very and want. I want some very, wa and ba. And the other famous example I remember was, what is wrong with leaning on a gate, a snake bit me? And, whether you were leaning on the gate or the snake was leaning on the gate. And it's 60 years old and we remember this. Viju, thanks a lot. Thank you. Thanks. This was hilarious, to say the least. Thanks for being with us as always. And
thank you.
I'm sure you're busy with the OLA. You're very active with the OLA, of course, so we'll see the elections. Our next speaker is YSET Girl. YSET Girl, 1970 batch, has had a checkered life as a teacher and worked with NGOs, moved around a lot in the back of beyond areas of Uttar Pradesh, where the husband was a IAS cadre, UP cadre officer, retired and settled in Chennai. She started Shishya from 1990 to 94 and probably later part-time. Her sister Pushpa, whom I don't know her very well, but I know Pushpa pretty well, Old Laurentian also, married to Old Laurentian Freddie Divan, whom I know well. And let me welcome and introduce Lata Tyagaraj and her memories of Mr. Thomas.
When I was asked to say a few words about Mr. Thomas, one particular incident comes to mind. It was the day when we girls had the dubious honor of getting caned by Princey. It was the year 1969. It was a Sunday. Champak House had gone to Ooty, and only Pankaj and Devda House were in school. Out of the blue, our housemistress decided that we should play games at 3 o'clock. So when the bell rang, we girls decided that we needed to rebel. We didn't go to the games field. Instead, we gathered on the girls' school lawn and decided to walk in a procession towards Princey's house, singing, "We shall overcome." This defiant walk really got our housemistress very angry, and it was reported to Princey. This, in the evening of the same day, Princey summoned us to his house just before dinner, and he seemed furious. He didn't have any words to say to us. He just asked each of us to extend our arms, and we were caned on our palms. It actually really broke our spirit, but didn't stop there. Next day at assembly, Mr. Thomas began his assembly talk. Yesterday, the girls thought they were creating history. Instead, they only proved themselves hysterical. Will the head girl and the vice head girl please step forward? And in a moment, both of them were stripped of their bars. It was a very sullen and momentous moment for us. We never expected something like this. We of the 1970 batch were sure that none of us would be chosen to be prefects, but we were proved wrong. Next year, the large-hearted Princey had forgotten this incident, and two of us were selected to be head girl and vice head girl. 20 years later, I encountered Mr. Thomas in a completely different environment. I was engaged as a teacher in Shishya, in the school that Princey founded. This was a school with a completely different philosophy. There was less of rigid discipline, there was no regimentation, and teachers, and to some extent students, had great access to Mr. Thomas. He had an open mind to suggestions, to any kind of projects that we might put forward to him. The success of any school can be gauged by the happiness quotient. And I think Shishya is one school where the teachers and the students, we were very happy and content. Thank you.
Well, that's thanks, Lata, for that. We come to our last speaker. Again, it's interesting that many of us have the understanding that he never used a cane, but I think Mr. Thomas seems to have been quite liberal. Maybe we had to deal with that, though none of us knew about it because he was so calm. Our last speaker studied again from the 1st to the 11th standard in the Lawrence School, Lovedale. He has attended 43 out of the 49 Founders' Day celebrations that have happened from the time he passed out. And it's only ironical or tragically ironical that his 50th Founders' reunion had to be called off because of the pandemic. He had 3 children in Lawrence School. And again, I came to know him not because I knew him in school, but because our children studied together and we were both OL parents with kids in the same class and very good friends even now. Big time auto dealer of India, one of the biggest probably, 2-time and current OLA president, Johnny Paul.
Hi everyone. This evening, the OL Assembly is doing a tribute to Mr. K.I. Thomas, who was a headmaster of Lawrence School, Lovedale from 1950 to 71. He was our headmaster throughout the time I was in school. I remember a few incidents which I thought I'll share with you. When I was in the 5th standard, my sister, who had just got married, came up to Ooty and wanted to pick me up. By the time they got in, it was a Sunday evening and it was pretty late. So they knew they wouldn't get permission. So they went straight to the headmaster thinking that he would agree since he knew my parents very well. However, Princey said, I cannot give you permission for this. You will have to go to his housemaster. Luckily for me, my housemaster agreed to let me go and come back on Monday morning just before classes. 2 years later, one of my uncles who had met with a car accident passed away. And the other uncles, knowing that my father wouldn't permit them to bring me down, sent a driver and car straight up to pick me up. The driver went to the headmaster and told him the incident. He said, I'm sorry, I cannot let him go because he has examinations next week. And I'm sure he'll be so upset that he will not do well. So when you leave my house, please turn left and go straight down. Please do not go and meet him. A few years later, he was taking creative English classes for us. And he asked us to do an essay. 2 days later, he called me to his room and wanted to know where I got the idea from and whether somebody helped me or I copied it from somebody else. When I explained what I did and where my ideas came from, he said, okay, now come to me. And when I went next to him, he showed me a few grammatical mistakes and spelling mistakes. And he said, you can go and you have done well. I said, thank you, sir. And I ran out of there. In 1969, we lost pretty badly in the inter-school sports. Usually, the champions would be us or another school in Kuno. We would lose or win by around 20, 30 points. This year in 69, we lost with 70 points. Princey was extremely upset. He spoke to Mr. Reddy and wanted to know what to do. He said, I can't go to town. Everybody makes fun of me. So Mr. Reddy arranged all the athletes of the next batch to come and meet the headmaster. So he asked them, what do you want? We must win next year. So they all said, sir, we do only 2 months of training for each sport, whether it's athletics, cricket, or football. We need the full year's practice and much better training. He said, we'll get that done. We also will arrange competitions for you so that you can try and do better and learn the better skills. And this went on for the whole year. And guess what? We won with 140 points lead. So that was a very, very happy way or a very good way that he arranged this thing. He was determined to win and he made it happen. That was Princey. Thank you.
That was a very straight from the heart talk from Johnny Paul. Let me wrap this up. We've overshot our time, but I guess we have we just needed this minimum amount of time to talk about K. Thomas and some facets. Salim, I would like to get Salim on again to tell us a little bit about Mr. Thomas outside of Lovedale, post Lawrence School days, whatever little he can tell us. Incidentally, Salim, it just struck me. I have a trivia from my classmate Prem Rao, and it struck me that in 56 years, I don't think I ever even bothered to find out what does KI stand for. I don't think anybody knows it. And then I realized Kovur Aip.
Correct, Kovur. Kovur is the family name.
Yeah.
Correctly speaking, I should have become KT Joseph. J is my middle name. In the traditional manner, the first initial is the family, the second is the father's, and the third is your name.
Yeah.
So I should have been KT Joseph.
It just struck me that I don't think anyone ever asked what did KI stand for.
Right.
Prem Rao, my classmate, has sort of shared this piece of information with us in our class. Interesting.
Talking about Prem Rao, actually, he sent me an email out of the blue a couple of weeks ago, telling me how much he remembered my father. As earlier I said, so many old Lawrenceans. I hardly know Prem Rao, but he took the time off to send me this email, totally out of the blue.
Yeah.
It was in June 5th, around Father's birthday day.
Okay. So that was the other piece of trivia, Salim. This is again, 34 years after K.I. Thomas left the headmaster's house with Tangam, another Tangam entered that house in 2005 April. So that was the other trivia that was reminded by. I mean, some few other people told me there was another Tangam in the house in 2005. So, and I guess in many ways, my memory of school as a 12-year-old, 14-year-old, and Mrs. Thomas was the role model for what I thought my wife Tangam should do in school. And I think the one thing that we did, I hope, did reasonably well was the tuck shop, where I remember Mrs. Thomas. We would wait on Sundays with the yellow and red tokens for our treat, and Mrs. Thomas standing over there with a smile, chatting with kids. So one can never forget the role that Mrs. Thomas played to keep us kids happy on a Sunday morning, something that we look forward to. But tell us quickly, just what was Mr. Thomas's life like outside Lovedale?
I just want to say one thing. It's lovely to see Mr. Iyengar. I'm seeing after many, many years. But one of the key factors in the success Kit had in Lovedale in his 20 years, he was able to gather a wonderful group of teachers around him. And the backbone of the boarding school is the housemasters and housemistresses. And in his time, Mr. Iyengar, Mr. Hariharan, Mac, Mr. C. Mukherjee, they were larger than life people, and children looked up to them. And that was a great factor in the success of Lovedale in those years.
Absolutely.
Anyway, having said that, when he left Lovedale and came to Chennai, I think you have that clip. Are you going to show that clip?
Yes.
Yeah, where he wanted to start a small school. In fact, he used to say, the best school to run is an orphanage. There won't be any parents to trouble me.
I second him on that in many ways. Yep.
Yeah. And soon after, he started Sishya, where he started in Adyar. And it was difficult to find a large enough vacant piece of ground. Luckily, he found one with the Travancore Raja in Adyar. And people told him, Mr. Thomas, you're starting your school in Adyar. Adyar in those days was, who will come? It's so far away. Today, of course, Adyar is in the heart of the city, and to get we have a little over 5 acres of land there. To get that sort of piece of campus today would be next to impossible. Of course, once he started his school, old Lawrenceans queued up to get their children and their grandchildren in. And it was second generation and third generation. So Kit was almost like the eponymous Mr. Chips in the book, Goodbye, Mr. Chips. He could say, Kupasamy, you can't speak spell nincompoop, nor could your father, and nor could his father. So, he had taught all three generations and knew all of them what their problems were. We have large number of OLs as parents in Shishya. Shishya is today almost 20, 30 years after father passed away, one of the very sought after schools in Chennai and in the top 10 day schools in the country in the annual assessment tables. We also have a Kit Thomas oration annually where Ramesh, you were gracious enough to accept our invitation to come and speak. And there are more Old Lawrencians at this oration than Shishya alumni every year. Such a large number, and many Old Lawrencians look forward to the oration to meet other Old Lawrencians who they don't meet elsewhere. So father started the school as an ICSE school in Adyar. It was initially a niche, ICSE not very popular, a niche school, progressively gathered popularity and is one of the, as I to repeat myself, today one of the very sought after schools in the city. I can go on and on, Ramesh, but I think we're running out of time.
I know. I'm sure you can. I'm sure you guys have built up a fabulous school without a doubt. And from surgery in the morning to school in the afternoon with you and Omna, I know you guys are doing a great job. Thanks, Salim. We have overshot our time. I hope Karthik and the gang are not. I hope we have not overshot it too much. We will wrap this up. Thank you, Salim, for really giving us an insight into a great man whom we all knew and respect very much. Before I close, I know that many of us would not have had, the guys of our vintage would not have had any records of what happened and how Mr. Thomas was. So let's hear the great man himself, straight from the great man, Mr. K.I. Thomas himself, before I wrap up this program.
Started a small school. My intention was to stop with standard 5, but under pressure, I have now raised it to the +2 level. Most Indian schools are repressive schools. Shishya is not. Emphasis is on the capacity to think, to reason, and form your own conclusion. Forward to the commencement.
That was Mr. K.I. Thomas, a brief clipping of his, and that was him. So, ladies and gentlemen, fellow Old Laurentians, this has been the attempt by all of us to pay a tribute to somebody who was truly great, who truly made an impact on us, and more importantly, forget about us individuals, we come and go. I think if you talk of Lawrence School Lovedale, of which all of us are extremely proud of, and when you talk to people from other major public schools, many people talk about their admiration for our network, our bonding, our sense of being one. And therefore, for Lawrence School Lovedale, I think I believe we need to acknowledge two people who are responsible for making this school and having given us the privilege of being Old Laurentians. One is, of course, Henry Lawrence, because the school goes by his name and he founded this school. So he built the school and founded the school. And I think the second one who has truly built the school is Mr. K.I. Thomas. 20 years with all the hassles of post-independence, a new school, British to Indian, military to civil. So in many ways, the school as we know it from 1950 to today, that's 70 years old. 70 years itself is a very long time in a school. Forget about the fact that we are hundreds of years old. Therefore, I think all of us need to acknowledge that the true builder of the Lawrence School Lovedale, as we know it, as we people know it, is truly Mr. K.I. Thomas. So that's Mr. Thomas. I would like to just wrap this up with my own personal story. And I think when I went back as the head of the Lawrence School Lovedale and then headed a couple of other institutions, the role model I had as the head of an institution was probably Mr. K.I. Thomas. I think back, and the two, three things, it was about discipline, it was about calmness, it is about, if I had to think through the whole thing, I can only say that I think he acknowledged that students will be mischievous. I think he acknowledged that there is a growing up period when you have to be naughty, you have to create some mischief. But having said that, there was a place for it, there was a way of dealing with it. And what I saw from Mr. Thomas, which I think I have learned substantially, is acknowledge mischief, deal with mischief, let it go on, treat the student with respect, treat the student with respect, because the job of a headmaster, or the success of a headmaster or a teacher, is about not demanding respect but commanding respect. And in many ways, in all ways, I would think Mr. Thomas did that brilliantly, and for all of us, a phenomenal role model. So that's it, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks to everybody, OLA, Johnny, Beena, Rohan, and all of you. Thanks for putting this program together. Thank you for giving me this privilege. You know, being an old Laurentian, being a parent, being the headmaster, Salim doing the Kid Thomas oration, you can't even imagine, and anchoring this program. I must be the most privileged Laurentian born and lived. So as this Pepsi ad, the famous Shah Rukh Khan Pepsi ad said, "Dil mange more," I can not say "Dil mange more" as far as Lawrence School is concerned. It has been excellent. Thank you to all the speakers who have graciously given us time and done takes and retakes, shared so many incidents. Thank you for your time, for your energy, for all that you've given to us this evening. Thanks to the teachers who were so good and shared so much. Mr. Ainga, Mr. Prince, of course, doesn't know that this is on. Mr. Reddy did. And Kultan and Karthik, I know you don't want me again on a program. You have been just too good. Thank you so much for stitching and putting this show together seamlessly, faultlessly. Thank you very much, and God bless. Over to you, Beena.
Thank you so much, Ramesh, for the effort you have taken to put this wonderful tribute to Mr. K.I. Thomas, and to Celine Thomas for filling us in on his life prior and after his tenure at Lovedale. Thanks to all the other speakers too. A special thanks to Sangeeta Jairam, the alumni coordinator on the campus, who took the trouble to coordinate the video clippings of Mrs. Enos and Gundam. Listening to our former teachers talking about their high regard for him is a testimony in itself of his greatness. It really opened a flood of memories of our school days on the campus. Like me, I am sure this has left very many of us emotional. He will live in our hearts forever. On behalf of the OLA committee, I want to thank every one of you for joining us on this special assembly. We will see you all for our next assembly on the second Saturday of October, which will be the 11th. Like I said earlier, we are always trying to be innovative, and the next assembly will be a hymn book special with former music teachers of School 2 and some batch reunions. A very special thanks to Karthik and Kuntal for their coordination, their conceptualization of every assembly, as they have worked tirelessly behind the scenes to put this all together. A gentle reminder to everyone, we have the OL Nation coming up as our next event, which is always done on the fourth Saturday of the month, on the 26th September at 5 p.m. As always, we have very interesting speakers and moderators on this program, so be sure to log in. We will now close this special assembly with our very own Johann Chaco, batch of 1991, Windia House, playing the sax, playing one of Kit's favorite hymns, Rock of Ages, on the saxophone, the finale to the great tribute. Goodbye and thank you all once again.
Hi,